Hello, and welcome to Session 3 High School Breakout Group of our Thriving Together webinar series in collaboration with Kern High School District. I'll be one of your facilitators today. My name is Sarah Bleeg, and I'm a Program Support Specialist out of El Dorado County Office of Education for the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project. I'll pass you over to my colleague now.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you remember me from the main session. My name is Juliet Inyanu. I'm a program support specialist out of El Dorado County Office of Education with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project. Welcome to the secondary breakout session. You're in for a treat.
I'll hand you over now to our three teacher leaders from Kern High School, Angel, Austin, and Adriana. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Angel Gavion. This is my 23rd year as an educator, and I have been working with special needs students since 2002. I have taught from kindergarten to 12th grade. Actually, my first experience for co-teaching, team teaching was in 2002, when I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade classroom with students that have 6 students with disabilities, and the rest were general ed students that I've been doing this for quite some time. This is my 5th year co-teaching at Kern High School District. I have co-taught in Intro to Physical Science, Applied Algebra, and I'm co-teaching currently with Mr. Villa, Austin, with Green Tech and Alternative Energy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Villa. I'm a general education teacher. I teach science for Kern High School District. This is my 2nd year as a teacher and my 1st year co-teaching.
Hi, I'm Adriana Vasquez. This is my 15th year teaching. I was co-teaching for 5 years. And this year I started a new program with our district for a teacher on a special assignment under co-teaching. So I work with all the co-teaching pairs in our district and help facilitate any of these things you're going to see in the collaborative partnership process. Then we'll be able to kind of talk things through that way.
So I think our presentation today is going to be focused on the different phases or stages of the collaborative partnership process. We kind of like divided the processes between the 5 of us. So I'll start. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to be focusing on forming. So when we talk about forming, what does it look like? This is actually a stage where you and your co-partner should have a common vision. When I talk about common vision, it's like you have your shared understanding of your goals. So Mr. Villa and I'm going to call him Mr. Villa because that's how I'm used to in the classroom. When we started, we kind of like talk together and what are our goals? What are our shared goals? What are our expectations from each other? Okay, what do we want to meet in the classroom? And both of us agreed on we want our students to be learning, and we want the needs of all our students, not just the ones with special ed needs, to be met, like all of the students. The next thing that we worked on when we were doing forming was we worked on agreed upon norms and expectations. I think this is very essential in creating a productive and so that you guys are harmonious in the teaching environment. So when we talk about expectations, what are the key components? So when we started the school year, we set a day that we are going to plan. Like that was the first thing that we kind of like set together was, okay, what days are we going to be planning? So we plan mostly Tuesday mornings, and sometimes we work, afternoon, and sometimes Thursday afternoon. It depends on our schedule. Sometimes we do it during his prep time. I go visit him, we plan together. And then we also share lunchtime together. And so sometimes we get to use that as a time to plan. It's very good for us to debrief because we have a class before and after lunch. So what Mr. V and I do is we talk about, okay, what worked, what bombed. That wasn't very successful. What can we do now? What can we do better? Or, oh my God, that worked so well. We could enhance it again for our next class. And then we also have a very open and respectful communication. I think that's one thing that I am proud of, Mr. B and I, even though this is our 1st year co-teaching together, is that we really have that respectful communication. We argue, but we argue in a very respectful manner. We disagree, and it's good because then we get to work on our disagreements, and then we get to find like a common agreement. Okay, let's work on this. And one thing that I always tell people is like, we don't take things personally. Sometimes, we get hurt with the things that we hear, but for him and I, it's all professional. It's all for the benefit of the students, so we don't take things personally. We also like to aim to have shared decision-making on the instruction. Mr. V is the content expert. I'm an educational specialist. He takes the lead on the instruction part, like on the curriculum part. And then I share my professional expertise as an educational specialist, like what can we do for interventions? How can we scaffold, lessons? What can we do to meet the needs of all students that are struggling in, for example, reading comprehension, because we do a lot of reading in our classroom. So then we would work on those, like, okay, this is what I could share my expertise to him. And he's very accepting, and we see that it works for our classroom. So that's kind of like our professional collaboration. And then we have a very specific role and responsibility clarity. Like what I said earlier, he's the content expert. I will never be a content expert. I will never be great at planning curriculum. I did not go to school to become a science teacher, but I have expertise that in especially designed instruction, which we provide our students with disabilities. And I know that it's not just going to benefit the students with special needs, but also all the students that are struggling. That's the best part about co-teaching is you get to help students with disabilities and then the students that are at risk. You have interventions that are going to make them be more successful in the classroom. And that's really something great about co-teaching. And then for instructional practices, we implement different co-teaching methods. We started with one teach, one assist. And then we kind of looked at it and it wasn't benefiting our classroom. And so we actually, Mr. Bayo can chime in. We do a lot of team teaching and parallel teaching. And team teaching, when I mean team teaching, is we're both standing up. We take turns. We don't actually plan who does what slide. It just blends in perfectly. Austin, you want to add something?
Yeah, so we both take turns teaching. It'll be back and forth. We'll all start the conversation about the content, and then I may have forgotten something, or there may be better directions or a different way to say something. And Angel will hop in there and she'll give them better instructions for what to do for the lesson.
Yeah, so I will help him with just maybe, because we have students with accommodations that they need the directions in variety of ways, or maybe they're not understanding, like it's too much direction at one time. And so then I would kind of like just chop them into parts. And then we do a lot of parallel teaching. We do a lot, like he's on the other side of the room, I'm on the other side of the room, we're doing the same thing. And then we kind of like just look at each other. We have signs that we didn't even plan for, and we know that like, okay, it's time to move on. And then we sometimes switch those groups just to see if there's things that I wasn't able to cover about content that Mr. Villa would cover. And then I will go on the other side and help the students that are struggling. So it's really a partnership where we take turns, we take responsibilities, we work with all the kids. In our classroom, there's no, you teach your kids, I teach my kids. That's never been a case with Mr. B and I. It's always been, okay, this is our students. And this is, it's time to brag, but we have students that do not go to their other classes. They would walk around campus, but when it's time for them to come to our class, they do come in and they do participate because they feel like this is an environment that I can be successful. This is an environment that my needs are being met and I'm not being targeted as a student that don't do work or is a behavior student. We never kind of like segregate them based on, okay, you're a troublemaker now. So they come in and they feel like it's a safe environment. And we see that actually in the results of our assessments, when they work on projects, our classroom is project-based. And we have a student that sometimes is a hard time finding groups, but our kids know that, okay, this is a safe place. We're gonna get this classmate and work with him. And then classroom management. This was the hardest part for the two of us. I am a 23-year teacher. Mr. V is 3 years because he was a resident in our school. And he's nice. And I am the very strict partner. And so in the beginning, it was more like me as the authoritarian. Like, I'm like, okay, these are expectations. And Mr. Villa would sometimes be like, I think that's too much. And then now we are back. We're on a space where he is actually the more disciplinarian than I am, which is funny because now he's the one contacting parents when students are on their phones or when a student is not doing their work. I mean, he's like, okay, give me a minute. I just need to message this parent. So, it took us 6 months to go there. It took us a lot of like talking and looking at each other and me kind of like making faces that the student don't understand. And then now we can pick it up. I understand it. Like the other day, one student was being disrespectful and, he helped me kind of like work with that kid. And that's very, very important. You have to be like in the same page. And you have to jointly enforce discipline and positive reinforcements. Our students like treats. They like fruit snacks. So, we take turns bringing those, because schools won't provide it, but we kind of like our reinforcement or positive reinforcements, calling parents, telling them good job. He got observed last week with our principal and, the principal sees the purpose and the objective of co-teaching because he sees that there's learning in the classroom. And then we're working on consistency on our classroom and routines. It's not perfect. We're working in there. We talk a lot, communication. And, I would tell him like, hey, that wasn't working, let's change it. As a special ed teacher, and I'm also the assistant program specialist, I have a lot of responsibilities in our school. So time is a problem. And I think it's just not in our district, it's everywhere. We have so many responsibilities, but we explicitly schedule our meeting. Like we must have a meeting. So whatever time it is, we need to sit down and we need to look at assessments. We need to look at lesson planning. So it's very intentional. And then when we talk about the last part here is the parity in co-teaching. I know can you blur your background, please, Austin? So the first thing that we kind of like did as co-teachers was we made them know that this is our classroom. So if you see in the back of his classroom, we have our names so that the students don't say, oh, it's Mr. Villa's classroom. So when the students come in, there's parity. He co-teaches with another teacher. All our names are in there. We have a workplace. Both of us have a workplace. The kids know that's my space. The kids know where his space is, and so they know it's both our classrooms. We never use I or me. We use us often. Like me and Mr. Villa, me and Mrs. Gavion. We always use togetherness so that the kids know that no, the other teacher is not better than the other one. When I'm not in the classroom, they actually would get mad at me because they'll be like, where were you again? And so I would say, okay, I apologize. I had to go to a meeting. So they value our presence in the classroom. And as co-teachers, I think that's one thing that you need to work on if you're starting your relationship is, you make sure the kids know that it's the two of you. It's not just one. It's not one gen ed teacher, not a helper. You are together. And then one thing also that we look at when we talk about parity is equal responsibilities. I am not a content expert. I don't know science a lot. So when we started the year, I used to sit down with him and I would have help me grade assessments or assignments. I would have him model 2 or 3 assignments, grade them. I'll grade 1 or 2 and I'll show him and then he'll tell me, okay, this one is 2, this one is 3. So he will help me. I learned a lot with sitting down with him. And then joint accountability. We are accountable for the student progress, whether they have needs, whether they have their learning levels, their backgrounds. It's both of us responsible in the classroom. And then this is where we again struggle is the balance presence. I hear a lot about people that co-teaching and they say, well, the kids don't see me as another teacher. And so I put a lot of importance on balance presence. That you are both actively involved in leading the classroom, not just one. You're not just standing in the back or you're just not walking around helping students. You have to have equal voice. It's very, very important. You are interacting with the students equally. Not just the main teacher, not just the general teacher and the special ed teacher just waiting to provide support. I hear it a lot. I help a lot of co-teachers around district, and that's one of our district, and that's one of their biggest concerns is the kid just told me that I'm not the real teacher. And so I then go back to like parity, like, okay, have you sat down? What do you guys do when you present yourselves in the classroom? That's a huge part of having a successful co-teaching partnership. I honestly was co-teaching with a teacher for 3 years, and this was the most struggle I had was parity. And I decided last year, I said, okay, I love working with this person, but I wasn't feeling valued as a co-teacher. And it's okay to speak up and say, this is not working. Because it's not going to benefit the students and it's not going to benefit you. You're not going to like your job. You're not going to enjoy it. So this year, I think Mr. V and I are in the place where we have good parity in co-teaching. Again, how do you foster parity in co-teaching? Use the we language. We are your teachers. Rather than saying Mr. V as the main teacher, define workspace. I know some people's like, oh, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter that there are 2 workspaces in the classroom, okay? Because that tells the kids that you are in that classroom. And then we plan lessons together rather than him doing it. He'll share with me the slides for a unit. I'll go through it. I'll tell him, hey, why don't we change this? We look at our assessments. Mr. Villa likes one version of assessment. I am a multi-version of assessment. So he will create version A, and then I will create versions B or C, and then we'll have different versions in the classroom. That also helps with, because kids now know how to play school. They'll take pictures, they'll share answers, they'll copy each other. They won't even know, the students don't even know that there are 3 versions of our tests because we don't tell them. Austin, you have something to say?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, could we move on to the next stage because, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so storming. Storming is the next stage of this process. And there was a lot of things that Angel was talking about that I had wanted to talk about as well. At the beginning, over the summer, we met for co-teaching through like a Canvas course. And this is where we decided on a lot of the information and background stuff that Angel was talking about. We had the Canvas course and it talked about a co-teacher contract. This is where we discuss what our classroom expectations would be, classroom procedures and routines, and then also when we will plan, like Angel was saying, we do spend lunch together. There was a question that I wanted to address. It said, do you meet daily with your class for 1 period? And are both of you there the entire time? So we actually teach 2 classes together. Like Angel was saying, I have 2 co-teachers. 2nd and 3rd period, I have Miss Sparks. And then 4th and 5th, I have Angel. And she is there the entire time unless she has to go to an IEP meeting or do something with another group of students outside of the class. But almost every day she's in the classroom with. And that's where in the teacher roles, I was going to talk about how IEPs will accommodations affect the student expectations. And Angel is the IEP expert, so I just asked her, hey, what are we going to do to help this student learn better? What are we going to do to accommodate this student in their learning disability or their behavior disability? and she tells me right away and we change it on in that moment. She also, we talked about how will differentiation occur. I left this up to her because she's the expert. She understands that what works best for students, and it makes it easier for me to just follow and listen to her. We talked about grading, and we decided that I'm going to grade stuff like assessments and anything that has really content driven. And then Angel would work on grading classwork, homework, things like warm-ups, doing notebook checks. And this splits up the work fairly, and it also makes my life a lot easier. We also talked about how we will decide on the rigor of the content. And the curriculum that we're going off of was really good for the COVID era. But now that students are getting back used to being at school, and we feel like the rigor is not up there. So we decided that we need to increase the rigor. So we've been using planning time or talking during lunch of how to better our assessments. And me being a second-year teacher, that's one of the things I really want to work on. So she's a good coach on how to build assessments. And then push and pull. So what happens when we come into conflict? We both work really well together. I know this may not be the case for a lot of other people, but we work together and we find what is best for the students. If that's the question you're asking, then it should end up with the best answer. And then we have also discussed how and when we will communicate and reflect on lessons. And we do this in a whole bunch of different ways. Sometimes if there's a problem in the classroom, Angel will just come up to me and whisper the issue to me, or she'll send me a little text and we know that that's something that we need to talk about later during lunch or during our scheduled co-teaching times. And then I just wanted to say that communication is key. We talk to each other daily. Is what we're doing in the classroom working for both us and for the students? If there's anything that we need to change, we discuss often if we are teaching correctly and strategies or accommodations that we need to change. And then also we talk to each other about what's going on outside of school as well. Like, how are the kids? How's life at home? And we mesh really well together, and it is important for everyone to know that life happens. And if your co-teacher knows some of the struggles you're going through, then they'll try to help you out the best they can. And then on the next stage, we have norming. And this is just continuing to work on what's best for the students, continue to build trust. Some things we do is switch roles every once in a while. I'll say, hey, Angel, do you want to take the notes for today? Or do you want to discuss, let them know what's going on, and you take, we switch roles sometimes. Make sure to build trust by opening up to each other. If there's something you really don't like that your co-teacher is doing, make sure to explain it, because the worst thing to do is sit there every day, your co-teacher doing something that you don't like, and it's getting on your nerves, but you're not saying anything to them, so every day it makes it worse. And then also ask your co-teacher if they need help. Even if you're going to say no, it's nice to know that there's someone there to help you. That's why it's nice to be a team. And then continue to push and pull. Is everything working? Is it going okay for the students? What changes need to be made? And then good communication can work wonders. And then eventually, changes to roles is okay. So at the beginning of the school year, like Angel was talking about, she was the discipline. I was unsure of how to handle discipline issues. And then she seemed to handle them fine. I let her deal with those things, and then eventually I started doing more and taking over more of that role. And then eventually stable roles will be formed. I have two co-teachers throughout the day, as I said earlier, and I have different roles and responsibilities between both of them. Angel is very excited and walking around and out there to help them, and then my other co-teacher is a little bit more laid back. So I have different roles depending on who I'm working with. And you just need to find out what works, and eventually things will just roll smooth. And then we're going to go to the next stage for performing.
So performing is when you are fully established as partners, and the teachers, both teachers collaborate effortlessly to enhance student learning. We're not here yet. This is what we're wanting to be at as the next years of co-teaching comes. I hope I talked to my API, my assistant principal, and I said, please keep me in the same classroom. Because it's so hard to have different co-teachers every year. You never would move on to the different stages. But this is kind of like a description on how it looks like. There's effective instructional strategies. You have high level of trust and respect. You have seamless collaboration, shared classroom management. So this is like an enhanced forming. And then how do you maintain this? Keep up with your planning time. Reflect on your strategies, debrief after your lessons, assessments, participate in professional development. We go to professional developments together. If the one, we try to be there together. And then again, communication and trust. And then we share our expertise with one another. The question here, it says, is there a difference in class sizes between co-taught classes and non-co-taught class? Actually, there's none in our school. Sometimes co-taught classes, the co-taught classes has even more students. In one of the co-taught classes that I am, it's an applied algebra class, and we have 29 students, and there are 14 special ed students with IEP. So they want, our school district is aiming for 33%, but the law says it's 49%. So we're in between those two. And how do we decide which students benefit in a co-taught class? The educational specialist or the special ed teacher looks at the caseloads of students. And if they have like learning disability, then we put them more like in a reading, in a English class. If they really struggle in math, they're in a class in math with a co-teacher. So it's based on their IEP needs as well. So that's kind of like what performing is. Adriana, your turn.
Yeah, so to piggyback on that conversation, in last week's with IEP or our vice principal in the master scheduling, she has that on there too. So she met with the special ed department and they discussed how many kids would need a co-taught class in English or in math. So that's when they knew in the master schedule that would try to be that. And so it's very important when they do that master schedule to bring it into the fact of, okay, well, this pair has been working really well together, but let's say it's not a need in that class. Having those conversations before you get into the cycle help benefit the pairs and make them collaborate more. Can you go to the next one, Sarah? Okay, so onto our journey part of this lovely cycle. This stage here, we discuss about at the end of the year, how we get the student scores from the beginning of the year and we match them to the end of the year to see the growth. And that's how we could show that being in a co-taught class is beneficial to students, not only the growth on their scoring on their assessments, but also with a qualitative data where it's the feedback. So a lot of students say we enjoy having two teachers in here. I'm able to go to one when I can't go to the other, or I like this one's personality better. So that's why it's beneficial to kind of have good co-teachers together. And as co-teachers, you discuss placement of students next year. So like, let's say students are all students in like a math class. There's a student who might need to be bumped up to another higher math class or brought down to a more remediational or take additional math classes for extra support. So we discuss that before you bring it to their counselor to set up schedules. And also usually in March, they send out a co-teaching support survey, how you felt this year went. What do you think are some adjustments I can make, that can improve your experience next year? If you attended any PDs together, it's very important that they use their planning time during the week because co-teachers get 1 hour per week to plan together, and some school sites they do 2 hours per week outside of their contract time to help co-plan, and that benefits the whole thing. And that's when we said we discussed about placement for co-teachers for the next school year, and that allows them to know at the end of the year who they might be placed with the next year. So they have the summer to work together and the summer to co-plan. We have a thing with our district where it's called a summer team. So it's a curriculum summer team where they work on the curriculum, and it's very important to invite the special ed teachers into those summer teams so they have access to the content, because a lot of time is the educational specialists who go into co-teaching, they don't know the material, so they don't feel that they're comfortable or even confident in teaching it. So providing the access and going through what's going to happen in the units prior to the start of the school year helps out a lot. Like Austin had said before, that there's a Canvas course that was created, and during the slide deck, you'll see like images of what it looked like, and a lot of it's like discussions, like how to get to know you before the school year starts. So you kind of get those things out of the way on your personalities or like what bugs you the most, so you don't have to start the school year with, oh my gosh, this person like answers their phone in the middle of class. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm going to step out and go take this. But those are the little things that might bug you, or talking over someone. So it's having those conversations before school year starts so you're not doing that in front of kids. So that's when we go through that whole cycle and we restart for the next year back to forming. Oh, there was another question on here. Oh, those are those. So any other questions? I think we all went through that pretty fast.
Thank you very much for sharing that information. It is so great to hear from the three of you and how you've developed your relationships and made your progress over the year. We'd like to invite anyone else to either unmute themselves and ask questions or put them in the chat. And we will have our team here to answer your questions. I know Juliet had one unanswered question from the main session that you mentioned you would take us through at the moment, Juliet. You are muted.
Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. So we had a question that came up in the main session, and so we were wondering if any of our presenters can answer this question. How do you know that you are successful within your partnership? Like how do you quantify, or how do you describe what success looks like within your partnership? And anyone feel free to unmute and chime in based on your experience. What does success look like within your co-top partnership?
For Austin and I, first we look at the assessment results. We do a lot of short answer assessments, and when we see students completing a CER correctly or giving us information that we want, we know that we were able to teach our lessons, meet our objectives. But mostly when the students in your classroom are happy. If you enter our classroom, you are going to see kids that are communicating, they're collaborating, they're wanting to answer. I think that's how we measure, Austin and Mr. V and I, how we measure success in our classroom. It's not always going to be based what they're learning, but how the classroom environment feels like. I'm honestly going to tell you, like I said earlier, kids want to be in our classroom because they know that it's an environment that is safe. It's an environment that they can learn. Austin, you want to add something?
I think you got it pretty well. You can tell that when the kids walk in, they are able to act themselves and not have to just put their head down and do work. Like, we interact with them and think they're comfortable around us.
Well, and one of the things I wanted to add to that is that I knew it was working and I had a good partner when I like missed them. Like it was just weird. Like summer, I was like, what am I gonna do without you this whole summer? So we would text or we would go have lunch and like hang out because you got used to having your partner with you every day for I co-taught with him for 4 straight periods together. So when I left my co-teacher to come to this position, I was like, I feel like I'm getting a breakup or like you're moving across the East Coast. So we had to schedule that time in where we could kind of still, have lunch together just to check up because, you know, it's more about not necessarily, it's about the grades, it's about attendance, it's about all that, but it's about coming to work every day and wanting to be there to be with your people because your people help build you to get there. So that's definitely cannot be forgotten.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, success really depends on the partnership, but I love how you highlight both student success, but also educator success. Like, what does that look like? And so having students experience joy even at the high school level, that's great. Love to see that because we all know at the high school level, a lot's happening. And so for you to walk into a classroom and see true joy, like the kids want to be there, that is a true definition for success and just students really truly belonging in that space. So thank you so much for sharing. Um, any other questions that came up in the chat? Sarah?
I do not
Okay.
see any more questions.
I actually had a question, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, so like a lot of students, when you offer accommodations in the general ed classroom, they feel a little ostracized. How do you kind of prevent students kind of feeling singled out for getting extra accommodations in the general ed classroom?
I'll answer that. Accommodations are tools for students to be successful. And so it's very individualized. And so we don't call it out in front of the class. We will call out the kid and say, hey, your accommodation says you can use your notes on the test. Are you comfortable doing that in front of the classroom? Or do you want to go take the test somewhere else where students cannot see you? Because we have to understand that we cannot tell the kid in front of everybody, hey, you need extra time for tests. Nope, you have to pull them out. I'm going to just quickly differentiate what specially designed instruction is versus accommodations. What we do in small groups is the specially designed instruction. So if I'm working on reading comprehension, I'm not just working with students that are with disabilities. I'm also working with kids that are struggling in reading that are in the gen ed classroom. And then when I work with accommodations, it's more like a very personal conversation with the students. Nobody hears it, nobody sees it. I put the kids in a place where they're comfortable to use them.
Thank you.
And to piggyback on that, a lot of times if it's good for one, it's good for all. So, you know, if if a student, even if a gen ed student not on an IEP, could benefit from extra time, who's it hurting and who's it helping? And ultimately, we go back to it's helping kids. So if it's good for one, it could be good for all. And denying somebody because they don't have an IEP, is that fair either? So that would just be the conversations that you have. And you know your kids, like, the ones who, when they ask for extra time, it's because they've been messing around and decided it was procrastination. Or the ones who say, oh, I was in the hospital all night with my little sister and I just didn't get a chance to finish it. But that's where you talk with your kids and you make that good relationship where they're open to kind of discussing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that great question. Any other questions? Either feel free to type it in the chat or feel free to unmute. We ended a little early, so we wanted to see if there are any questions to continue to open that space or keep that space open before we close out. Hey, so if there are no other questions, we are going to close out. And so we wanted to highlight the tool that we introduced to you in the main session. And so I know we walked you through the 5 stages of the collaborative partnership process. And so feel free to, we just dropped the link in the chat to this resource. It outlines it outlines what happens in each stage, but also talks you through what is needed internally, but also how your leaders can support this process, because it's definitely something that I've experienced in all of my collaborative partnerships. And so this is a great framework to utilize either at a teacher level, but also at an administrator level in supporting partnerships at your campus. Okay, and so we also want to again remind you of the Padlet of resources. So all the slide decks from this session, both from the main session and our breakout session, but also from session 1 and 2, can be found on our Padlet of resources. We're going to drop the link again in the chat, but you can also get access to the Padlet through the QR code as well too. We are working on getting the recordings on there, and so be on the lookout for that to be uploaded in the near future. And we want to get your feedback on how the sessions are going. And so please take a couple of minutes, because we are wrapping up a little bit early. It'll take maybe 2 to 3 minutes. You can scan the QR code if you have your phone with you, or we drop the link in the chat. Please, we would love your feedback as to how it's going. We look at the feedback to help us structure or make updates to the next session. And we do have one more session remaining in this series. We also want to remind you of our inclusion conference that's coming up in May 8th and May 9th. And so feel free to register. It is free of charge. And so please share out with your colleagues. We would love to see your faces at our inclusion conference in May.